of the rim. Garnett on the slam foul. Using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry.
What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and just a quick note before the video starts. We are about this close to 400k subscribers. It's been so long I low-key forgot about subscriber goals, but yeah, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit sub at the end. Let's go ahead and crack this one open. Yeah, it's that time of year again. I think I've made this video every year since 2020 now, and they're always fun to look back on. Of course, last year I did it and didn't even consider the Boston Celtics, so that's fun. But to be fair, at the time it would have looked incredibly biased. In any case, here we are in 2023 at the All-Star break, and here we have what I assume to be a record 8 teams that I wouldn't be that surprised to see win the championship or at least be in the NBA Finals. At this point, I do understand that the litmus test for a title winner might be, can they beat the Suns? However, knowing how injuries, chemistry, and just unforeseeable situations in general have affected the last few seasons, I think it would be foolish to limit the number of teams in this video down to that criteria. Of course, there are safer bets than others. Speaking of which, shout out to the sponsor of today's video, and cut. Yeah, I had a somewhat witty ad transition here, but it did not reach approval in time, so we're just gonna start the video. As a matter of fact, yeah, I do have something. Just come through to playback and watch some basketball when you're done with this video. We'll be on. Starting off with the Celtics, obviously not biased in any way. Once again, winning would mean banner 18, which they've been in pursuit of for quite some time, but also a redemption story from a very unique season. As mentioned earlier, it was hard to believe a team could start as poorly as they did and realistically make any type of run. Not only did they come within 2 wins of the 2022 title, but I believe that stopped them from making some trades they likely would have made had they remained a 500 team. Thus, winning this year would be the completion of a process that began taking shape around 2017, and we'd likely cease to even be discussing trade rumors that often swirl around this team. Tatum and Brown would finally have their place in history as a successful duo and would be in position to compete for titles through the foreseeable future with the correct roster. To this point, together, they've been to the conference finals, second round, conference finals, and NBA finals. This will be their 5th try, and I'm just not sure how many more cracks at it they'll be granted by the front office after this, given the talks that we hear every year. Well, the Bucks are doing the thing again. At the time of this recording, they're on a 12-game winning streak, and Giannis is being Giannis for the most part, while Jrue Holiday is an all-star. Them actually winning the title will totally depend on Chris Middleton's health come playoff time, but assuming he's okay, they'll be right in the thick of it as usual. Milwaukee going on to do it again would mean their 2nd title in just 3 years, which obviously would be a big boost to Giannis, who's already a top player of all time, but that feat would also put this core in some pretty rare air, as when you discuss teams that even win it more than once in general, you start to discuss all-time greats. Do it with the same core in a short amount of time, you're etched into history in a very legendary way. I focus on that because it doesn't feel like we think of this Bucks core in that sense. Hell, a lot of people were surprised at Jrue Holiday's all-star selection. Maybe they'll all be viewed differently if they scale the mountain again this year. Speaking of Jrue Holiday, a 2nd championship on top of his all-star selections and the type of two-way player he's been in his career, I feel like the conversation may start to become very different around him as well. Okay, so for the record, the Sixers are a team that I would not be surprised to see in the NBA Finals, but I kind of would be surprised if Doc Rivers finally got this team over the hump. Narratives aside, the Sixers have been pretty fantastic after what was an injury-riddled start, and I'd say things with Harden have gone about as good as they could have hoped given his injury history. Speaking of which, in the event that Philly does get this done, James Harden would at long last be a champion after being in a good amount of situations where it seemed like he'd accomplish it. This would put a cap on what's been a legendary career, and at this point fulfill probably the only thing he is missing. It'd be quite the shock, as it feels like NBA fans have become set on the idea he's just one of those legends that's never going to win one. Doc Rivers would be pretty vindicated as well, as he'd have his first title since 08, and it helped rewrite a lot of conversations surrounding his coaching career. And then of course, Joel Embiid, who's already in the pantheon of top skill centers of all time, would add the most important hardware after losing out on MVP again and again. You also have to really want this if you're Philly just in general, because James Harden is on a different timeline than Embiid age-wise, and you've got to start to wonder how many more legitimate cracks at it they'd get before the Sixers have to once again change the cast to keep Embiid's title window open. Finally, rounding out the Eastern Conference, the Cleveland Cavaliers. For once, at least at the moment, health is not sabotaging their ability to reach their full potential, and they've been very solid. They made a go-for-it move with Donovan Mitchell, and I'd say it's paid off as much as it could have thus far. For Mitch, it'd be vindication after many disappointing exits with a limited Jazz team that never did much better than dark horse contender regardless regardless of where they were in the standings. Evan Mobley would essentially be kicking off what looks like is going to be an amazing career with a championship, and I definitely would have said Kevin Love would be a two-time champ with the Cavs, but he just got bought out. For Cleveland specifically, there's no denying this would be special, as it'd be their first major success without LeBron James. Even with what they've been able to build, there'd still been that lingering thought of what if he did a farewell, capping off his career with this amazing core, possibly winning another title. Although he already came back and got the job done, mended relationships with the front office, Dan Gilbert let it be known how much he wanted to be successful without LeBron when he left the first time. There's no doubt that fire is still there, and they could truly begin to write a chapter without him, behind a team that could realistically contend for years. That brings us to the Western Conference, which is a bit more interesting these days because of the Kevin Durant trade. With that deal, as alluded to earlier, you could probably argue that if you can't beat that specific team 4 times, you can no longer get out of the West. Fair point, but once again, I've got PTSD from joining a talent like this after recent events. I've actually got to see them stay on the floor together for legitimate periods of time before I go mentally handing them anything. With that being said, I guess we can just start with them. The Suns absolutely have to win a title at some point in the next year or two with what they just pulled. Trading as much as they did for Durant means they understood what everyone else could see. Their window with that current group was likely done. Chris Paul was looking older, Aiden was looking unhappy, and they'd already had 2 cracks at it. Once Paul would have gone on to retire, scaling that mountain would have only been more difficult, especially because if they didn't grab KD, another team was going to. I believe that would have eventually led to a breaking of that core. Now, technically, they're not clear of this issue, but obviously winning a championship would justify the whole no matter what, as it'd be their first title in franchise history. Chris Paul would at long last have a championship, completely rewriting the narrative around his career. Booker and Aiden would likely be at no risk of winning out anytime soon, and Kevin Durant would have his 3rd on top of what's already been a legendary career. Now, given that these 3 rings would have been the result of some of the most impressive looking rosters of all time, still not exactly sure how this will be received, but in any case, it would behoove Phoenix to take care of this while it's early so they don't end up like the Nets. The Nuggets are interesting because it feels like in terms of story, Jokic is all anyone's thinking about. This is still a young team with time, and really this will be their first legitimate go at it with everyone healthy. Due to that fact, Jokic is possibly headed toward his 3rd straight MVP, with this being the first time he's actually had championship expectations. You hear the rumblings now, but nobody truly cares that he hasn't been able to have postseason success with Will Barton or Monte Morris. This year, if they don't at least reach the conference finals, I expect the noise to be much louder. Knowing that, a championship before the real noise ever has a chance to begin would be pleasant for the Joker. It would also cap off one of the most dominant individual 3-year runs we've ever seen from a superstar, and significantly boost his all-time ranking with a ton of time left in his career. Speaking of having time on your side, the Memphis Grizzlies. I will go on record saying I do not believe this is their year, but it'd be wrong not to include the 2nd seed in the West on this list given the last team I'm going to discuss. They're generally disliked by fans, they've absolutely not been fine in the West, and their proposed package that was ready to go for KD says they understand where the roster is at in comparison to some of the teams they'll have to face. That being said, a 2023 title for them would be amazing considering I just don't think the roster is ready for that yet. They'd be winning it before Ja has an elite 3-point shot to counter how playoff defenses guard him, before they have a legit 2nd superstar level player next to him, and in only their 2nd year of having any kind of expectations. After watching them nearly lose to the Wolves last year and their lack of dominance in this campaign, I certainly have them as more of a dark horse at this specific moment. But at long last, after rebuilding from what was an exciting grit and grind era, there would be a title in Memphis. Ja Morant, who was drafted in 2019, would have probably led this team to a championship. With that, I would expect the conversations surrounding him and Zion in that draft to get pretty interesting. Speaking of perpetually injured players, waiting in the shadows for the day they can have a healthy, uninterrupted run, the Los Angeles Clippers. This team had a collapse in the weirdest season of all time, an injury ruined them in 2021, and more injuries in 2022. Coming into this year, I believe they may have had the most talented roster on paper and were only questioned because of health. In the present day, it's looking about as good as anyone could have hoped, and despite the slow start, they're poised to jump into the 3rd seed if they can keep it together. With that in mind, a title for them would be a bit similar to the Suns in that it would have made it all worth it. Every single time something bad happens to them, people are so quick to point out the package it took to get Paul George, and how only a championship could justify it. This finally becoming a reality would bring the highest honor to a long failing franchise after so many cursed moments. It would also extend the lifetime of this duo, as I believe if they don't win this season, they might start looking at how to proceed in recouping assets so they aren't totally screwed forever. Both guys have a player option in 2025, making next season their official final guaranteed one at the moment. I don't expect either of them to turn down like $48 million, but that would also be their 5th try if they didn't get it done this year, which honestly looks like their best chance. So not that it's absolute doom if they don't win right now, but the franchise is getting pretty close to some dicey situations with this championship window, especially considering the injury track record. Also, as of today, Russell Westbrook is the newest Clipper. Without analyzing that at all, a championship obviously rights a ton of wrongs for him after the last few seasons. Those are pretty much the two situations I don't know what NBA fans would do if they actually materialized. Russell Westbrook with a championship and the Memphis Grizzlies with a championship. I just don't know how NBA audience is going to receive either of those. Either way, that's the whole of it. Those are the 8 teams I can currently conjure up an NBA Finals appearance for, and if they can get there this season, they've got a chance at winning it. The one side note I will leave is that if the Suns become as dominant as their potential allows in the final 20 or so games, this whole video is useless and we're all doomed. However, just let it play out. These things rarely go as planned. Let me know who you think the contenders are in the comment section. Remember to hit subscribe if you enjoyed the video. We are like this close to 400k. It's been a long time coming, or at least just like the video. If you enjoyed it, of course. Remember to hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications every time a new video drops, and I'll see you all on the next one.